Hi, Stacy.
Hi, Jason,
I'm
virtuoso
so
narrator.
I'm so glad we're doing this. I think people will be really interested. I mean, especially my colleagues, uh, about what an exchange between a narrator and an author can be like. And
Especially because I feel as if you know my words better than I know them. I mean, I've certainly never had to read this book aloud. I'm interested in how you find the voices for the characters on the page, but also in how you convey what is so easy for me, which is the punctuation. In other words, how do you convey when you're quoting someone? Is there like an inversion of the voice in a funny way when you're quoting someone, or when there's when something's parenthetical? Is there a way of signaling that?
with Samuel Adams, and I always think of actors in my head because I am so steeped in movies and I'm a real cinephile. And I think Samuel Adams could be like the English actor Jack Hawkins. He had this gruff, manly, not over accented voice. For Thomas Hutchinson, who is this sort of, foppish, vain, English fellow, I thought, why not Rex Harrison? You're landing on voices that sound quite different. They're in different places in
Right.
your instrument. But when doing just quotes within a sentence, sometimes you have to learn not to shift too completely into a character just for, that little sort of interstitial, quote of, 10 words or something.
Because otherwise you're interrupting the flow of the narrative too
You are.
much. Do that. Yeah.
And Edward Harriman, who is one of the greatest narrators we ever had, his recording of David McCullough's John Adams is just a masterclass. He would just do this little hitch, the slightest little pause, and change the voice just to being a little more declarative, and you knew it was a quote. Because it just had such a distinct style from page one.
You said that early on. You said that it seemed as if I had adapted the language for the subject, which I thought was which is fascinating to me because I was unaware of it
It
myself.
really, I mean, you never thought about that?
Well, I think you were comparing it to the Franklin book, which, you had said was written in a very different style, which in some way, probably, I mean, I like to think, of course, that I got to be a better writer by the Adams book, which is whatever, 15 years later. But that Franklin in Paris lends itself to a more florid style. It's a larger cast of characters.
Yeah.
It's in the midst of the French court. There are a lot of kind of curly cues plot-wise and aesthetically.
Yeah.
And this is a bolder, more straightforward, more sort of fundamental, more elemental story. So it kind of made sense, but you're the only person obviously close enough to the prose to have actually noticed that, I think. Do you have a preference between reading fiction and reading nonfiction?
I think I really like fiction.
You don't have to think about what was this voice in actuality. Did this person have an accent?
You have a lot more latitude, but you got to really read the book from beginning to end when you prep, because people have run into real surprises where they get down to the last chapter and he said in his rather thick brogue, like, what? Oh my, what'll I do now? Either cut that line out or re-record the whole thing. Fiction keeps you on your toes, and because of the shifts between characters and the highs and lows of it, especially if it's good, I feel like I'm just more fully there.
Well, you have the plot, which is obviously a binding agent to some extent.
But in a good nonfiction book, like the one we're talking about, that's a very definite plot. When you think about how, the creation of our country came down to these few guys, in a chess game with each other, it's like a movie. And it almost didn't happen, That's the other amazing thing. We think of our country as inevitable, and
Right.
and it so isn't.
Well, that was one of the reasons I wanted to write the book, to remind us that it's such a winding fits and starts business, and
Yeah.
it's by no means preordained, obviously, which is the trick always in writing history, is to inject that level of improbability and uncertainty into it, right? We all know what happens, but you want the reader to live in suspense of not knowing for as many pages as you can possibly pull it off.
Any idea about what's next?
I have an idea. I'm not sure it's what I'll do.
Let it be a masculine figure that I can
Let it be in the voice of Jason Culp is all I can say.